The worst part about working the closing shift at Harper's Wholesale wasn't the long hours or the rude customers or even the endless cleanup that corporate insisted on. It was the silence. The kind that sinks into the store after 10 p.m. when the families disappear, the carts stop squeaking, and the building turns cavernous and too still. Harper's was a massive membership warehouse. High ceilings, dimly lit aisles, and shelves stacked 30 feet up. After hours, every sound traveled farther than it should have, like the building breathed and echoed on its own. I'd worked there almost 2 years before anything strange happened, long enough to get numb to pretty much everything. But thinking back, I should have known something was wrong the moment the new guy started his shift. His name was Mason, a quiet guy in his mid-20s who had just moved to town. He looked normal enough. Jeans, hoodie, a nervous smile that made him seem harmless. He barely talked the first week, but everyone wrote that off as new job jitters. It wasn't until the night he approached me during closing that I realized something was seriously off. It was 11:20 p.m. and customers were trickling toward the exit as the loudspeaker announced that we were closing in 10 minutes. I was restocking batteries up front when Mason walked over. His face was pale, too pale. His eyes kept darting toward the back of the store. "Hey," he whispered, "can I ask you something?" "Sure, what's up?" "You've heard it, right? The knocking?" I blinked. "What knocking?" He swallowed hard. "From the back freezers, like someone knocking from inside." I forced a laugh. "That's the compressors. They click sometimes." He shook his head. "No, this is slow, heavy, like someone trying to get out." There was something in his voice that made me shiver, but I brushed it off. New employees spooked themselves all the time. A building that large made weird noises, and night shifts made people imagine more than what was really there. But an hour later, when the last customer was gone and the doors were locked, I heard it too. I was sweeping near the produce section when a dull drifted from the back of the freezer wall. Slow, rhythmic, like someone hitting the inside with the heel of their hand. 3 knocks. Pause. 3 more. I froze. The sound wasn't metallic or mechanical. It sounded fleshy, human. I called out, "Anyone back there?" Silence. Then 3 more knocks, louder this time. I put down the broom and walked quickly to find my supervisor, Marlene. She was in the front office counting money when I told her what I heard. She didn't look surprised. Her expression didn't even change. Instead, she sighed, rubbed her temples, and said, "Don't mention it to the night crew. It freaks them out." "What freaks them out?" I asked. She closed the cash drawer harder than necessary. "Nothing's in there. Nothing ever has been." The way she emphasized it made me feel anything but reassured. Later, when the store was nearly empty and just a few employees were left, I found Mason again. He was stocking cereal and kept glancing nervously down the aisle. "You heard it," he said quietly. I nodded. "Did you ask anyone else about it?" "They won't talk about it," he said, "except one guy who quit last week. He told me before he left that something was wrong with the walk-in freezers. Said he saw shadows inside, moving around when no one was in there." I laughed, but it came out strained. "Freezers don't have shadows." "I know what he said," Mason replied. "And tonight I saw something too. When I walked past the door, I swear I saw someone standing behind the fog glass." A chill crept over me. Maybe it was someone doing inventory? He shook his head slowly. No one was scheduled back there tonight. We both fell silent as a loud bang echoed from the freezer area, then another, then a long scraping sound. Every hair on my arms rose. Mason's voice cracked. "I'm not going back there alone." "Neither am I," said. But of course, that didn't stop us from eventually going. The building felt even larger as we approached the freezer section. The overhead lights flickered. They always flickered in that part of the store, but tonight it felt more intentional somehow, like something inside the freezer was messing with the power. When we reached the walk-in freezer, the glass was fogged over. The door was shut tight, and one of the metal racks had been wheeled in front of it, blocking part of the view. "Someone must have done that," I whispered. "Why block the door?" Before Mason could answer, the knocking started again. Closer, louder, more urgent. He backed up. "Don't open it. I'm not an idiot." Then from behind us, something whispered. It was faint, just a breath of sound, but both of us heard it. "Help." We spun around. No one was behind us, as the aisle was empty, the pallets untouched. "I'm leaving," Mason said. I don't care if I get fired. Before he could take a step, the freezer door rattled violently, like someone inside was slamming both fists against it. Then, clearly, unmistakably, the sound of fingernails dragging across the metal surface. Screeching. Slow. I grabbed Mason's arm and we ran. We didn't stop until we reached the front of the store. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard it hurt. Mason was trembling. "We have to tell Marlene," he said. I hesitated, but nodded. Whatever was happening back there wasn't normal, wasn't safe. We went to the front office, where the door was cracked open, and if Marlene wasn't counting cash anymore, she was sitting motionless at the desk, staring at the security monitors with an expression I didn't recognize. Fear. True fear. I'd never seen that look on her before, not even when a customer once threw a lawn chair at her. "Marlene?" I said. She didn't answer. Her eyes were locked on one of the monitors. "Look," she whispered. We leaned in. Camera 14, back freezer entrance. Someone was standing in front of the freezer door. But it wasn't an employee. They were too tall, their limbs too thin, the angle of their shoulders wrong, like their body had been assembled incorrectly. Their head was tilted at an unnatural angle, chin almost touching their chest, and their hands, both hands, were pressed flat against the freezer door, exactly where we'd heard the knocking. Then the figure slowly turned toward the camera. Only it didn't have a face. Where the features should have been, there was only a smooth, pale surface. No eyes, no mouth, but somehow we could feel it staring at us. Mason stumbled back, swearing. Marlene reached for the phone, dialing corporate security so fast her hands shook. Before she could finish dialing, the lights in the office flickered. All the monitors went black. Then, slowly, every monitor turned back on. Except now all of them, every single camera feed, displayed the same image. The freezer door, and the faceless figure. But this time, it was closer, as if it was moving toward the camera, toward us. Marlene whispered, "We need to leave, now." We didn't argue. We grabbed our things and ran for the exit. The store was dead silent except for the hum of the overhead lights. Every aisle we passed seemed darker, emptier, more distorted than it should have been. When we reached the exit, the doors didn't open. I waved my hand. Nothing. Mason pushed. Nothing. Marlene cursed and reached under the counter for the emergency override key. She jammed it into the lock and twisted. The doors slid open just a few inches, then slammed shut so violently that the glass rattled. We all froze. From the center of the store came a single, echoing knock. Then another, and another, coming steadily closer. We backed away from the door. Marlene tried the lock again, hands shaking so hard the key almost fell from her fingers. Behind us, the knocking grew louder, then slowed, then stopped. For a moment, everything was still. Then the lights in the store all went out at once. Blackness swallowed the entire building. Someone, maybe Mason, maybe me, screamed. I felt a cold presence behind me, like breath on the back of my neck. Then the doors burst open. Light from the parking lot flooded in. We didn't look back. We didn't grab our belongings. We ran. All three of us sprinted into the parking lot until we reached our cars. Marlene fumbled her keys and dropped them 3 times before she finally got into her SUV. Mason dove into his beat-up Honda. I jumped into mine. We all sped out of the lot without a word. The next morning, I expected the store to be closed, police tape everywhere, something. But at 9 a.m., Harper's Wholesale was open as if nothing had happened. Lights bright, employees smiling. I quit that day. Mason quit too. Marlene never came back at all. Rumor was she moved to another state within a week. People ask sometimes why I don't work retail anymore. I tell them the hours were rough, or the customers were rude, or the pay wasn't worth it. But the real reason? Sometimes late at night when the world is quiet, I still hear those 3 slow knocks. I hear them even when I'm not near a freezer. Sometimes I hear them inside the walls of my own home. Story the end. I was 21 when I took the job at Harbortown Market, a mid-sized store wedged between a pharmacy and an abandoned tanning salon in a strip mall on the outskirts of Mobile, Alabama. It was supposed to be temporary, just something to hold me over while I saved money to go back to school. But 3 months in, I found myself clinging to the paycheck and the familiarity of the aisles because leaving meant uncertainty, and uncertainty scared me more than frozen floors, cranky customers, and late-night shifts. That was before the night I learned there were worse things than uncertainty. I had just been promoted to closing supervisor, which really just meant I was the one who had to lock the doors and double check everything while still making barely above minimum wage. The night in question was a Friday in December, late enough in the month that Christmas music had wormed its way into my head, early enough that the frantic, last-minute holiday shoppers hadn't taken over yet. By 8:55 p.m., most customers had cleared out. The last stragglers, a mother and her teenage daughter arguing about cookie frosting, drifted toward the registers. The air outside was heavy with fog from the bay. The front windows were covered in condensation, reflecting yellow from the parking lot lights. I remember thinking the place looked lonely in a strange way, like the building itself was tired. At 9 sharp, we locked the front entrance. My coworker Marcus headed to the back to break down cardboard. I took to the aisles to start zoning. Everything felt normal. Background music played low, the heaters hummed, the freezers clicked in their rhythm. But around 9:20, the first sign something was off happened in the toy aisle. I was straightening a shelf of board games when I heard the unmistakable sound of something sliding on plastic. Not dropping, sliding. Slow, deliberate. I turned to look. A stuffed reindeer toy, which had been sitting near the back of the top shelf, moved, just a few inches, but definitely not from gravity. It slid forward, stopped, then toppled off the shelf and hit the floor. I jolted backward, letting out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. My first thought was some kind of rodent, but that shelf was too high. And the toy hadn't bounced, it had been pushed. I picked it up and placed it where it had been, chalked it up as nothing. When you're tired, working retail nights, you let little things slide. I wish I had trusted that first instinct. 5 minutes later, the lights flickered. Only for a second, but long enough for the aisle to flash dark and reappear. I checked the breaker room. Everything looked normal. The emergency lights weren't on, and yet the air had that charged feeling before a storm. I radioed Marcus. "You notice the lights just glitch?" "No," he replied, sounding annoyed. "Probably the grid. It's muggy as hell tonight." Maybe he was right. Still, that tense, buzzing feeling stayed. By 9:40, I was making my way to the seasonal aisle when I heard something metallic tapping. Not randomly. Not like a shelf expanding. It was patterned. Tap, 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 tap. Like someone was drumming their nails against metal. I stopped walking. The tapping kept going. Tap, 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 tap. It was coming from aisle 14, the cleaning supplies aisle. I rounded the corner slowly. The aisle was empty, the floor spotless, the shelves packed neatly with bleach bottles, detergents, and mops. But halfway down, a shopping cart stood perfectly still in the middle of the aisle, and its front right wheel was shaking. Just the one wheel. Vibrating against the tile as if someone were kicking it softly, except nothing touched it. Tap, tap, tap. I swear my breath felt thick, heavy, like breathing through cotton. "Marcus," I said into the radio, keeping my eyes on the cart. "Can you come to aisle 14 now?" He groaned loudly in the speaker. "Dude, I'm in the middle of—" "Just come," I said sharply, surprising myself. The cart wheel stopped vibrating the moment his footsteps approached. He rounded the corner that saw me staring at an unmoving cart and rolled his eyes. "You dragged me back here for this?" "It was moving," I insisted. "Not rolling, vibrating. Man, the floors are uneven. These things move all the time. It wasn't rolling." "Okay," he said, raising a hand. "Fine, you're tired, you're stressed. Let's just finish." He left, but I stayed a few seconds longer, feeling eyes on me. Not human eyes, not angry ones either. Just watching, observing. I moved on, but tension clung to me like static. Every aisle I walked into, every shadow between the shelves felt wrong somehow. Around 10:05, I was sweeping near frozen foods when the store's intercom pinged. It shouldn't have. The system only worked from the customer service desk or the manager's office. Marcus was nowhere near either. Then a voice came through. A whisper. A man's voice. Low. Raspy. Almost like someone exhaling syllables rather than speaking them. "Hello?" Just that one word. Drawn out. Barely audible, but undeniably a greeting. My skin crawled. I froze with the broom mid-sweep. I ran to the front. Marcus was stocking batteries near the registers. "Did you use the intercom just now?" He looked at me like I'd lost my mind. "Why the hell would I?" I didn't answer. I stared toward the service desk. The intercom mic was resting in its cradle. "Maybe someone's still in the store," I said. "That's not funny," Marcus muttered, but there was an edge in his voice. We walked aisle to aisle, calling out. No answer. No sounds except the hum of freezers and distant drone of cars outside. But when we passed aisle 9, the home goods aisle, I felt cold, like stepping into a freezer. I could see my breath, faintly, drifting into the stale air. The aisle lights flickered again, and at the far end of the aisle stood the silhouette of a man. Tall, dark, motionless. I grabbed Marcus's arm hard. "Do you see that?" He lifted his head, squinted. "See what?" The silhouette didn't move. "Right there," I whispered. "At the end." Marcus took one step forward. The overhead lights blinked. The figure vanished. A cold wave rolled down my spine. Marcus groaned and rubbed his face. "Man, I'm done. I'm not doing any more extra shifts with you. You're going to give me a heart attack." I wasn't amused. We continued closing, but I refused to go into any aisle alone. I stayed near the front, pretending to tidy impulse buys while trying not to stare at the mirrors angled at the back wall. At 10:40, we turned off half the lights. At 10:50, we shut down the registers. At 11, we prepared to lock the doors. It should have been over. It wasn't. We had just stepped into the vestibule when something inside the store slammed. A single, deafening crash that reverberated across every aisle. We spun around. "What the hell was that?" Marcus muttered, voice trembling. "We have to check," I said automatically, even though every part of me screamed not to. We crept down the main aisle. The sound had come from the back. As we passed frozen foods, the automatic lights flickered on, behind us. Not in front of us, behind us, like something had moved. When we reached the back aisle, the crash's source became clear. An entire end cap display of laundry detergent had been knocked over. Hundreds of bottles scattered across the floor, but not randomly. They formed a path, a crooked line snaking between aisles leading toward the stockroom. Neither of us wanted to follow it. But the door to the stockroom was slightly open, only by an inch or two, but it was open. And the stockroom lights, which were motion activated, were on. I touched the handle. Cold. Colder than anything in the store should have been. I pushed the door open slowly. Inside, the stockroom was silent. But in the center of the floor, someone had dragged cardboard boxes into a circle, not stacked. Dragged. Scraping marks etched the concrete. And at the center of that circle lay the same stuffed reindeer toy I had put back on the shelf earlier. Its head was torn open, stuffing scattered like snow around it. I felt something tighten low in my stomach, fear so physical it made me nauseous. Marcus backed away. "Nope," he said, shaking his head. "Nope, we're done. You can fire me, arrest me, I don't care. I'm not staying." We ran, lights flickering, air freezing cold, the sound of faint footsteps behind us, too soft to be human, too close to ignore. We burst through the front doors, locked them, and sprinted to our cars without even saying goodbye. The next morning, the store manager called me. Her voice was hushed, trembling. "Did you two have some kind of breakdown last night?" she asked. "The cameras cut out around 10:45. When the system rebooted 20 minutes later, the store was trashed, and..." She stopped. "And what?" I asked. "There were footprints," she whispered. "Bare footprints, wet ones, leading from the stockroom to the front doors." She took a shaky breath. "And they didn't match either of yours." I quit that afternoon. Marcus left the next day. Harbortown Market closed permanently 6 months later. Officially for declining sales, though anyone who worked nights knew there was more to it. Sometimes when I pass strip malls late at night, I get that prickling feeling again, that sense of being watched, observed, followed, and every so often, when I'm alone in my apartment, I hear tapping. Tap, 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 tap. Just like that shopping cart wheel. Just like before everything went wrong. I pray it's only in my head because I know somewhere out there, whatever was in that store is still watching, still waiting, and it remembers me. Story the end. The first time it happened, I thought it was just my imagination. I had been working the night shift at Gordon's General Store for almost 6 months by then, and nights tend to do weird things to your mind. The store itself was nothing fancy, just a small, old-fashioned corner shop in a sleepy town in Pennsylvania. Fluorescent lights buzzed constantly, the linoleum floor always creaked, and the bell above the door jingled every time someone came in, even though at night it felt like nobody ever did. But it wasn't the emptiness that got to you. It was the silence between the noises, like the building itself was holding its breath. It was a Thursday night around 11:30 p.m., and I was stocking shelves in the back near the cleaning supplies when I heard it. A low thud, like something heavy falling to the floor. I froze. At first, I thought it was a box slipping off the top shelf, which happened all the time. But this sounded different, slower, deliberate. I called out to the stockroom, "Hello? Is someone back there?" No answer. Not even the usual echo, just silence. I grabbed a flashlight and carefully made my way down the aisle, checking each shelf. Nothing. Everything was neatly in place. The air felt colder than it should have been, even for late November. I shook my head and muttered, "It's probably just the building settling." I wasn't convinced. Something about that sound had set my nerves on edge. The next incident happened about a week later. I was manning the counter during the graveyard shift, just me and an older employee named Frank, who usually slept through his break in the stockroom. Around 1 a.m., the doorbell jingled. Odd, because no one had entered yet. I looked up from the register and saw a man standing near the candy aisle. He was wearing a long trench coat and a hat pulled low over his face. His hands were in his pockets, and he didn't move. "Can I help you find something?" I asked, my voice a little too high. He didn't respond, just stood there. I studied him for a moment, trying to tell if he was even breathing. Then, slowly, he raised one hand, like a wave, but stiff, and pointed down the aisle. My stomach dropped. I felt that same cold prickling at the back of my neck. Before I could say anything, he turned and walked toward the back of the store. I called after him, but he didn't answer. I tried to follow, keeping a safe distance, but when I reached the aisle, it was empty. I checked the stockroom, the restroom, every corner, nothing. Frank didn't wake up. That was when I realized I couldn't explain it. After that night, strange things started happening more frequently. Objects would move on their own, cans would topple off shelves when no one was nearby, cleaning supplies would be rearranged after I had just set them straight. The lights would flicker, even when the circuit breakers were fine, and sometimes I would hear faint whispers echoing through the aisles, so soft I couldn't make out the words. One night, about 2 months after the first incident, things escalated. I was closing alone because Frank had called in sick. The last customers had left around 10:30 p.m., and I was counting inventory in the back near the freezer section. That's when I heard it. A slow, deliberate scratching sound. At first, I thought it was a rat. The store had old plumbing and walls with gaps, but this sounded too precise, too heavy to be a rodent. I grabbed a flashlight and shined it toward the freezers. The light caught something moving. A shadow, tall and thin, sliding along the frosted glass doors. I froze, my breath catching in my throat. Then the freezer door rattled violently. Hard, not a small tremor. It shook like someone was pounding on it from the inside. "Hello?" I called, voice trembling. "Is someone back there?" No answer. The rattling stopped. The shadow vanished. I took a step forward, flashlight shaking in my hand, and then I saw it. A handprint on the frosted glass. A pale, elongated handprint, smeared as if pressed hard. It was too high to belong to me, too large to belong to any normal person. I stumbled backward, tripping over a pallet. The sound echoed through the store, loud and hollow, and for a moment I was certain someone was laughing. I didn't stay to investigate further. I ran to the front doors and tried to open them. Locked, of course. I hit the panic button, but the alarm didn't go off. No lights, no sounds, just me standing in the silence that had grown impossibly heavy. Finally, the doors slid open, as if they had been waiting for me to leave. I ran out into the parking lot, heart hammering, convinced that I was being followed. I called my manager the next day, trying to explain everything. He laughed it off, told me I was imagining things, that night shifts did weird things to people. But I knew what I saw. I knew what I felt. It didn't end there. Weeks went by, and the incidents became more terrifying. One night, a customer came in near closing, an older woman who smelled faintly of smoke. She wandered the aisles silently, never picking up anything, never looking at me when I tried to greet her. When I asked if she needed help, she didn't answer. She just moved slowly toward the back of the store. I followed at a distance. She disappeared behind the aisle near the cleaning supplies, and when I rounded the corner, nothing. No one. The shelves were intact, no doors open, no sign she had been there. Another night, I was in the stockroom when I heard heavy footsteps on the ceiling above me. The stockroom was in the basement of the store. There was no one above. The footsteps grew louder, faster, then stopped. I froze, holding my breath, and then the lights flickered out. When they came back on, a metal cart I had just leaned against had been pushed to the center of the room. I was shaking so badly I had to leave. I told Frank and he laughed, calling me a scared little kid. But the unease didn't leave me. I started noticing shadows where they shouldn't be, the sounds that didn't have sources, and always that cold, creeping feeling that something was following me. The final incident happened about 6 months after I started. It was the worst. I was closing again, alone. The store had been unusually quiet all night, almost too quiet. Around 2 a.m., I heard the sliding doors open. I ran to the front, nobody there. Then I heard soft, deliberate footsteps coming from the back of the store. Slow, heavy, not quick like a normal person walking. I grabbed the flashlight and cautiously moved toward the noise. When I reached the aisle near the freezers, I saw a figure. Tall, thin, wearing a coat that looked gray in the flickering light. Its head was tilted unnaturally, and it didn't move like a normal person. No blinking, no breathing, just slowly advancing toward me. I stumbled back, heart pounding, flashlight shaking. I fumbled with the emergency exit key, hands trembling, and managed to unlock the doors. The figure stopped at the edge of the light, then vanished. Just like that. No sound, no movement, nothing. I ran out into the parking lot and didn't look back. The next day, I turned in my notice. I never went back. I quit retail altogether, moved to another state, and even then, I can't shake the memory. Sometimes when it's quiet at night, I hear it, the slow thud of footsteps, the scraping of fingernails, the soft whisper that sounds like someone calling my name. I've told a few coworkers who were still working there, but no one really wants to talk about it. They just shake their heads, whisper about the thing in the back. I know what I saw, I know what I heard, and I know that whatever it was, it's still in that store, waiting for the next night shift worker who thinks they're alone. Story the end. I had been working at the Corner Mart in rural Ohio for almost 2 years before anything truly strange happened. The store was the type of place everyone drove past on their way to bigger towns. It was small, dimly lit, and the fluorescent lights flickered more often than they stayed steady. During the day, it was busy enough to keep you distracted, but nights were different. Nights were when the air inside felt too heavy, like it was pressing in on you from every corner. I worked the late shift most nights, closing hours from 6 p.m. to midnight. It wasn't glamorous, but it was quiet, and I didn't mind the solitude. My coworker Tina worked with me most evenings, but sometimes she had to leave early for college classes. Those nights I was alone. It was on one of those alone nights that everything started. I was restocking the soda aisle around 10:30 p.m., humming softly to myself to keep awake. The store was silent except for the faint hum of the refrigerators. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the door to the back storage room shift slightly. At first, I thought I had knocked it, but when I turned toward it, the door was wide open, even though I was sure I had closed it after retrieving the last box of snacks. Shrugging it off as a draft, I went back to shelving cans. A few minutes later, I heard the soft clink of metal on tile coming from the front of the store. I froze. That sound could only have been a shopping basket tipping over, but I knew there were no customers inside. I walked cautiously toward the front, expecting to see the basket, but the aisle was empty. Nothing had fallen. A creeping unease settled over me. I returned to the soda aisle, trying to convince myself I was imagining things. About 15 minutes later, I heard it again, this time unmistakable. Footsteps. Heavy footsteps, slow, deliberate, moving from the back storage room toward the front. My heart started racing. Tina wasn't there. The only other place someone could be was outside, maybe hiding in the shadows. I flicked on the security camera monitors behind the register. The feed from the storage room camera was completely black. The others were fine, showing the empty aisles and checkout. I leaned closer to adjust the angle, and that's when I saw it. In the reflection of the monitor behind me in the darkened aisle, a figure, tall, thin, hunched slightly, standing perfectly still. I spun around. Nothing. No one. Just the empty aisle and the humming fluorescent lights. My stomach sank. I called Tina, but her phone went straight to voicemail. I tried calling the manager, but he was gone for the night. I was alone, completely alone, and I had no idea what I was dealing with. The next strange thing happened when I went to retrieve some cleaning supplies from the storage room. The moment I stepped inside, the door slammed behind me with a deafening bang. I yelped, reaching for the handle. It wouldn't budge. I was trapped. Then I heard whispering, soft, barely audible, coming from the far corner of the room. I froze, my hands shaking. I couldn't see anything in the dim light. I leaned closer, straining to hear. Leave? Now, a voice hissed. It was low, dry, and somehow hollow, like the sound was coming from inside the walls. I tried to open the door again. Locked. I pounded on it, screaming for help. Nothing. My voice echoed back at me from the empty shelves. Then something brushed past my shoulder. Not air, but something solid. Something cold. I turned, and in the shadows I saw movement, just at the edge of my vision. A figure, taller than any human should be, slipping between the crates. Its form was dark, almost smoke-like, but undeniably there. I slammed myself against the door, finally forcing it open. I didn't look back. I ran to the front of the store, grabbed my coat, and left. I didn't care about the alarm, the register, or the fact that the store was supposed to be locked by now. I drove home, shaking so badly I could barely see through the tears in my eyes. The next day, I told the assistant manager about what had happened. She frowned and nodded slowly. "You're not the first," she said. "There have been a few reports over the years, people hearing things, seeing things, but no one really talks about it, especially on the night shift. People just quit." I didn't want to believe her, but the following week, during another night shift with Tina, it happened again. We were closing up, doing inventory, when we heard footsteps in the empty store. I called out, but no one answered. Then, from the storage room, a loud crash. It sounded like someone had thrown boxes to the floor. I ran to check, and the room was empty. Boxes were neatly stacked. Nothing had been disturbed, but the smell, rotten, metallic, lingered in the air. It was unbearable, like something had died in that room and been left to rot for days. I gagged, coughing, and we both ran back to the register. That night, I noticed something on the security monitors I hadn't seen before. In the farthest aisle, near the cleaning supplies, a shadow moved against the shelves. It was thin, too tall to be human, and it glided rather than walked. I blinked, and it was gone. I tried to tell myself it was a trick of the light, but the feeling of being watched never left me. Not during the shift, not when I drove home, not even when I went to bed. I started having nightmares about the store, about the tall shadow, about the whispering voice that promised I wouldn't leave. Weeks later, Tina quit. She said she couldn't handle being alone there anymore. I understood completely. I covered her shifts when I could, but after a particularly bad night where the storage room door slammed behind me and I saw the shadow lingering just beyond the corner, I quit too. I didn't care about the job or the money or the fact that no one would believe me. I was done. Even now, years later, I drive past that corner mart and get chills. Sometimes I see the lights flicker as if someone or something is still inside, pacing the aisles, waiting for the next person to be alone. I never saw Leon again after that first shift alone. I heard rumors later from another employee that he left suddenly one night and never returned. Some say he just moved away, but I can't help wondering if he saw the same thing I did, if he heard the same whispers, if he felt that presence that seems to exist only in the dead hours of the store. I never want to work retail again, especially not at night. Some things I've realized are better left unexplored. Some places, especially the quiet ones with too much shadow and too little explanation, are better left alone. Even now, when I think about the store, the memory comes back. The slam of the storage room door, the whispering voice, the tall, dark figure that seemed to move through walls and shadow. I can still feel its presence, like it's watching, waiting for someone to return. I've tried to tell this story to friends, to anyone who would listen, but most think I'm exaggerating. They say retail can be stressful, that I was probably tired or imagining things, but anyone who's worked alone in the dead hours of a store knows the truth. The quiet isn't empty. It's watching. And it waits. Story the end. It was a slow Thursday night at Mapleview Discount, the kind of small-town retail store where everyone knew your name and most nights were painfully quiet. I had been working there for about 6 months, mostly mornings and afternoons, but that week I had picked up a few late-night shifts for extra cash. Closing shifts were always eerie in a small store like ours. dim aisles, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and the hum of the refrigerators in the back. I didn't mind it too much. The quiet gave me time to organize shelves and count inventory. But that night, something changed, and I would never look at late night retail work the same way again. I arrived around 9:30 p.m., the only other closer that night being Marty, a part-time stock clerk who looked like he had barely slept in days. He gave me a tired wave as he left for the back room to finish restocking. That left me alone on the floor with the store almost completely empty. Only a handful of customers trickled in that evening, mostly teenagers looking for cheap candy or adults picking up last-minute groceries. By 10:15, the store was nearly empty, and I started my usual closing routine, sweeping aisles, restocking small items, and double-checking the displays. I noticed him about 10 minutes later, standing in the end aisle near the cleaning supplies. He was wearing a dark hoodie, the hood pulled low over his face, and jeans that looked too baggy for his frame. At first, I thought he was a normal late-night shopper. He didn't seem to be shopping particularly efficiently. Instead, he stood motionless for long stretches, staring at the shelves like he wasn't really looking at anything. Something about his posture set off a chill in my stomach, though I couldn't explain why. I went back to sweeping aisle 5, trying to ignore him. The floors squeaked under my broom as I moved, and every now and then I caught him glancing in my direction. When I glanced up from my work, he would be staring at a completely different aisle, almost as if he knew I was watching him. I tried to shrug it off. Weird people were part of retail work, especially at night. At 10:35, I started announcing the store closing time over the intercom. Attention shoppers, Mapleview Discount will be closing in 25 minutes. Please bring all final purchases to the front. Usually, this would empty the store within 10 minutes, but the man didn't move. He didn't even twitch. He just stood there, staring, hooded eyes fixed on some invisible point. I felt my unease growing, but kept reminding myself I wasn't in danger. Retail workers see strange behavior all the time, and 9 times out of 10, it's harmless. But when he finally moved, it was slow, too slow, deliberate, like he was testing the pace of every step. He walked to aisle 8, lingered, and then disappeared behind a stack of cleaning products. I exhaled, telling myself he probably left through one of the back aisles, though I hadn't seen any customers near the doors. I returned to sweeping, but the silence in the store started to feel heavier, oppressive. It was one thing to hear the buzz of fluorescent lights. It was another when it seemed like every sound echoed differently, almost like the store had its own pulse. By 10:50, all other customers were gone, and I started locking up the registers, counting the till for the night. That's when I heard it. A soft scraping noise coming from aisle 7, near the household items. At first, I thought it was Marty, but he had already left to restock the storage room in the back. I grabbed a flashlight from under the counter, a thin old model we kept for emergencies, and stepped toward the aisle. There was nothing. The shelves were untouched, products perfectly in place. Then I heard a whisper, soft and almost swallowed by the hum of the fluorescent lights. "Don't turn around." My heart leapt. I spun around, flashlight in hand, expecting to see some teenager playing a prank. Nothing. Aisle was empty. The store felt off, heavier. Like the air itself was pressing down on me. I tried to shake it off, telling myself it was my imagination. Night shifts did that to you, especially when you were alone. But then I felt it, the sensation of being watched. Not from the aisles, not from the shelves, but from somewhere behind me. I couldn't place it, couldn't see it, but my instincts screamed to leave. I hurried toward the front, intending to finish my till count and just leave. That's when I saw him again, or rather, a shadow that resembled him, slipping between the corners of the store, disappearing behind displays. My stomach twisted. I called out, voice trembling, "Excuse me, sir, you need to check out." No response. The shadow moved again, faster this time, disappearing down a side aisle. I froze. My flashlight flickered. Then I saw him, or something that looked like him, in the reflection of the security mirror hanging at the end of aisle 3. Only his reflection wasn't consistent with the way the store should have been. He was closer than he should have been, and the hood was pulled back just enough to show pale skin, almost sickly, and eyes that were impossibly dark. I stumbled backward, tripping over a display. The flashlight clattered to the floor, spinning light across the tiles. When it finally settled, the aisle was empty again. I ran toward the storage room, intending to hide until someone else arrived or until I convinced myself I'd imagined the whole thing. As I approached, I heard the scraping again, louder this time, coming from the stockroom doors. My hand shook as I reached for the handle. I tried to open it, but it wouldn't budge. It was as if something heavy was pressing against it from the other side. "Hello?" My voice was shaky. "Is someone there?" A deep, rasping whisper came from the darkness behind the door. "Don't leave." The sound wasn't human. It was warped, like someone had recorded a person speaking and slowed it down. My chest tightened. Every instinct screamed at me to leave, but I couldn't. I had to know if someone was inside. I leaned my weight against the door. It budged slightly. My flashlight flickered on the floor inside the stockroom. I could see the pallets of boxes, the empty carts, and then I saw him, or whatever it was, standing at the far corner, impossibly tall, hooded, completely still. I wanted to run, but my legs were frozen. Then it moved, slowly, deliberately, toward the door. I stumbled back. My flashlight clattered again, beam shaking across the floor. When I looked back up, it was gone. No one. No shadow. Only the faint hum of fluorescent lights and the metallic scent of the stockroom air. I bolted. Out the front doors. Into the cold night. My hands shook so badly I couldn't get my keys in the ignition at first. I finally managed it and peeled out of the parking lot without looking back. The next morning, I called in sick and didn't go back that week. When I returned, Marty was there. I tried to explain what happened, but he laughed it off, joking that I had let the night shift get to my head. But I knew. Weeks later, a coworker told me the store had received complaints from other night shift employees. They reported hearing whispers, seeing shadows, feeling like they were being watched, even when alone. Nothing was ever proven. No cameras caught anything unusual. No maintenance issue explained it. Corporate dismissed it as employee stress or overactive imagination. I never worked a night shift after that. I avoid being alone in stores after dark. And sometimes when I walk past a convenience store or supermarket, I see someone in a hoodie in the reflection of the glass doors, standing still watching. And I can't shake the feeling that if I looked closer, I'd see those impossibly dark eyes staring right back at me. Story the end. I worked the night shift at a big box retail store in Ohio for almost 2 years. The store was one of those places that never really closed. The fluorescent lights stayed on until the last customer left, and even after hours, the hum of the freezers, the refrigeration units, and the ventilation system kept the store alive in a way that made the air feel heavy and unnatural. I wasn't new to night shifts. I had done them at a pharmacy before. But nothing prepared me for what happened one December night when the store felt wrong. It was a Tuesday, so the store was practically empty by 10 p.m. My coworker, Jamie, and I were the only ones left. Jamie was working the registers while I stocked shelves in the electronics section. I had just finished organizing the new video games and was about to take a short break when I heard a thump from the home goods aisle. At first, I assumed a customer had left something behind, but when I called out to Jamie, she said the store was empty, except for us. I walked toward the aisle and noticed that a small display of decorative lamps had fallen over. Not tipped, just lying on the floor, scattered. I checked the security cameras on my walkie, and nothing showed anyone in that part of the store. No one had been there. I felt a chill, but I picked up the lamps and straightened the display, chalking it up to a wobbling shelf or maybe some vibration from the HVAC system. About 15 minutes later, I was moving toward the seasonal aisle when I heard a low scratching sound coming from the back near the storage rooms. It was slow, deliberate, like someone dragging their fingernails along metal. I froze for a moment, then shook my head. "It's probably just the carts in the stockroom," I muttered to myself. But as I turned the corner, I saw a shopping cart rolling slowly toward the end of the aisle. No one was behind it, and it didn't have the momentum to move on its own. It stopped suddenly, then jerked sideways as if someone invisible had pushed it. I called Jamie on the walkie, but she didn't answer. I walked cautiously toward the cart, heart pounding, and when I got within a few feet, it jolted again, spinning in a perfect circle before coming to a stop. My stomach dropped. Something wasn't right. I ran to the registers. Jamie was there, frozen, staring at the monitor. "What's going on?" I asked. She didn't answer at first, then whispered, "Look at the cameras." On one of the screens, I saw the electronics aisle. A figure was standing there, tall, thin, and completely still. It looked like a man wearing a dark hoodie, hands at his sides, staring directly into the camera. I felt my breath catch. "There's someone there," I said. Jamie shook her head. "No, that can't be. The store's empty." I replayed the footage. The figure hadn't moved once, even as I watched. Then, in a sudden blur, it vanished. I leaned closer, thinking it was a glitch, but the screen froze on the empty aisle. A loud crash made us both jump. We ran toward the back of the store, expecting to find a shelf had fallen over. When we got there, everything seemed normal, except the stockroom door, which was slightly ajar. Neither of us had opened it. I approached slowly. The lights inside flickered, then came on. Boxes were stacked haphazardly on the floor, and a single mop bucket had been overturned. And in the corner, I saw something that made my stomach twist. A small pair of shoes. Child-sized. Clean. But there were no kids in the store. I called the manager on my phone, but there was no answer. The store's landline was dead. The only way out was through the front doors, but as we ran toward them, the automatic doors refused to open. Jamie slammed her hands against the glass. I rattled the lock. Nothing worked. Then we heard it. Footsteps, soft, slow, coming from the main aisle. But when we turned, no one was there. The sound echoed again, closer this time, circling around us as if the store itself had a heartbeat. I remembered the emergency exit in the back. We ran toward it, ignoring the screeching sound of metal carts behind us. When we reached the door, it was locked too. The alarms hadn't gone off. The doors didn't open. We were trapped. That's when the voice started. It came from the speaker system above, faint at first, a whisper. "Get out." We froze, staring at each other. Jamie clutched my arm, her face pale. "Who's there?" I shouted. No answer, just static. Then, louder, almost behind us. "Get out." We bolted toward the middle of the store, toward the front, thinking maybe the doors would finally open. As we ran, the lights flickered violently, and I caught glimpses of shadows moving along the aisles. Shapes that shouldn't have been there. Too tall, too thin, almost human, but wrong. At the customer service desk, the phones rang. All of them. Landline, office phone, even Jamie's walkie. But no one was on the other end. The sound of breathing filled the receiver. Panicked, we ran toward the electronics aisle where the figure had been. The shelves were empty, but the floor was now covered in hundreds of small white beads. I didn't know what they were at first, but then I realized they were the stuffing from the decorative lamps we'd straightened earlier. Jamie screamed. A cold hand brushed against my shoulder. So cold it burned. I spun around, but nothing was there. Finally, after what felt like hours, the front doors clicked, and the automatic sensors allowed them to open. We didn't stop running until we were in the parking lot. The fog had thickened, and at the end, the streetlights made long shadows stretch across the asphalt. We didn't look back until we reached our cars. Neither of us spoke on the drive home. I don't think either of us wanted to admit what had happened. The next morning, I called the store manager. He sounded annoyed. "You're late," he said. "What happened?" I hesitated. "Last night, things got weird. Lights flickered. Stuff moved. There was someone in the store." He laughed. "You and Jamie probably just scared each other. The store's been empty for weeks at that hour. Nobody's there. Go home and get some rest." I didn't argue. I couldn't. But when I got to work the following night, Jamie was gone. She didn't show up, didn't answer texts or calls. I lasted 2 more weeks. Every night it was the same. Footsteps when no one was there, shadows that moved too fast, whispers over the speaker system. Objects fell or shifted on their own. Every time I tried to leave, the doors refused to open for a few agonizing moments. Every night, I felt that same cold presence brushing past me. I quit on the spot. I never returned. Months later, I drove by the store. The sign was still lit, but the lot was empty. No cars, no customers. I saw a faint movement through the front windows. Tall, thin, standing perfectly still, looking directly at the glass. I've worked other retail jobs since then, but nothing compares to that night. The store is still there, somewhere in Ohio, still humming with life after hours, still waiting. And I know deep down that whatever was inside that store hasn't left. Sometimes I swear I hear it, even in my apartment, faint tapping, the soft hum of a freezer, a whisper over the static of my old radio. And I remember, It's still watching. Story the end. It was a slow Wednesday night at the Greenfield Mart. The kind of night where the only sound was the hum of the fluorescent lights and the occasional beeping of the self-checkout machines. I was working the closing shift, which meant I had the store almost to myself, except for a couple of night stalkers and a few last-minute shoppers who always seemed to linger too long. My name is Alex, and I'd been working retail for years, so I'd seen my fair share of weird and rude customers, but nothing prepared me for what happened that night. I was arranging items in aisle 7, near cleaning supplies, when I noticed a man leaning against the end cap at the other end of the aisle. At first, I thought he was just waiting for someone, but something about the way he stood made me uneasy. His hood was pulled up over his head, hiding his face, and he didn't move when I walked past. Most people at this hour would glance at you or mumble a greeting if you were in their way. He did neither. He just stared, or at least I think he was staring, into the shelf in front of him. "Sir, can I help you find something?" I called, trying to sound casual. He didn't answer. He didn't even flinch. I shrugged it off. Maybe he was hard of hearing. I went back to arranging the shelves, but I kept stealing glances at him. He hadn't moved an inch. After a few minutes, I walked closer. That's when I noticed something strange. He wasn't holding anything. Not a basket, not a cart, not even a single item in his hands. He was just standing there. I moved to the end of the aisle, thinking maybe he had left and I just hadn't noticed. But he was still there. Same position, same motionless stance. The fluorescent lights above him flickered, making his figure jump in jagged, uneven movements. I shivered. Something felt off. I called over the walkie-talkie to the stalker in the back, a college kid named Marcus. "Hey, you seeing the guy in aisle 7? Yeah," Marcus said hesitantly. "That's weird. He's been there for like 15 minutes. I nodded to myself. That confirmed it. I wasn't imagining it. Most people didn't linger that long, especially when the store was closing. I walked closer, and this time I noticed the way his shoulders were stiff, like he was frozen in place, almost like a mannequin someone had left on display. "Sir, I really need to close up soon," I said, trying to keep my voice calm. "Can you head to the front with me?" Still nothing. I backed away slowly, my stomach knotting. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw movement. Something or someone was gliding along the ceiling tiles above him. My pulse spiked. I shook my head, trying to convince myself I was imagining it. Retail was long hours, fluorescent lights, and too much caffeine. Your brain played tricks on you sometimes. But the sound was unmistakable, a faint scraping, like fingernails against a dry ceiling. I called out again, louder this time, and the man's head snapped toward me. At least, I thought it did. His face was obscured in shadow, but I felt his gaze pierce me. My skin crawled. Something about him wasn't human, or at least, it didn't feel human. "Marcus, come help me," I whispered into the walkie. "Now." He arrived a few seconds later, face pale. "What's going on?" I don't know. Something about that guy feels wrong. He's not leaving." Before Marcus could respond, the lights flickered violently, and the hum of the overhead fixtures grew louder, almost like a low-pitched growl. The entire store felt colder, like the temperature had dropped 10 degrees in a matter of seconds. Marcus and I exchanged a nervous glance. Then I saw it clearly. A shadow, darker than any shadow should be, slithering along the ceiling, moving toward the man in the hood. It paused, hung in the air for a moment, and then descended. I couldn't breathe. The man in the hoodie didn't move. The shadow touched him, and he collapsed to the floor. Not like he fell, but like his body just gave way all at once. There was no sound, no scream, no thump, nothing. Just silence. "Alex, we need to go," Marcus whispered, his voice shaking. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. We backed away slowly, then ran toward the back room where the emergency exit was. I fumbled with the door, heart racing. It stuck for a moment, and I thought we were trapped, but it finally gave way. We pushed through and sprinted across the parking lot, not stopping until we reached the streetlights on the corner. We called 911 from the sidewalk. The dispatcher tried to calm us down, asked for details, but I realized I couldn't explain what we'd seen. A man standing perfectly still, a shadow moving across the ceiling, and then him collapsing as if pulled under by something invisible. There were no footprints, no evidence, nothing that could explain it. When we returned to the store the next day with the police, there was no sign of the man. No blood, no body, no trace of what had happened. The ceiling tiles were intact. The security cameras had been mysteriously disabled during the incident. The manager claimed it must have been some kind of elaborate prank, or maybe we both imagined it after working a long shift. But Marcus and I knew what we'd seen. After that night, I transferred to a different store. Marcus quit entirely. I never spoke to anyone else about it because people laughed or dismissed it as stress-induced hallucination. But every time I pass a grocery store at night, I feel that cold, crawling sensation in my spine. I can still hear the faint scraping across the ceiling in my memory, the sound of something moving just beyond human perception. Months later, I heard another employee at Greenfield Mart mention a hooded man who appeared after hours, standing perfectly still, scaring staff into leaving early. I didn't need to ask any questions. I already knew. Some things in retail aren't just rude customers or long hours. Some things wait, watching from the aisles, and you only see them when it's too late. Even now, when I close up at my new job, I double-check the aisles. I check the ceilings. I listen for the scraping. I never stay too long after closing. I never walk alone. Because I know that shadow is still out there somewhere, moving silently, waiting for the next person foolish enough to think a store is safe when the lights go out. Sometimes in the dead hours of the night, I dream I'm back there, running through the aisles, trying to escape something I can't see, something that doesn't breathe but somehow watches, moves, and waits. And every time I wake up, my heart is racing, and I swear I can hear that low, scraping sound just beyond the door in the empty space where the ceiling meets the lights. Story the end. It was my third month working the overnight shift at Henderson's General, a small, barely profitable grocery store in suburban Pennsylvania. Overnight shifts weren't glamorous, but they paid slightly better, and I liked the quiet, mostly. The night crew consisted of me, a kid named Brandon who was about 19, and occasionally a stock boy who came in to help for a few hours. Management didn't care much about the night shift as long as the store wasn't getting robbed. That was fine with me, until that December when everything started feeling off. The first time I noticed something strange, I was reorganizing the canned goods aisle around midnight. The store had that typical late-night smell, cold, dry air mixed with faint bleach from the mop buckets we'd used earlier. I was stacking soup cans when I heard the automatic doors chime. That wasn't unusual on its own, but the sound was followed by silence. No cartwheels clattering, no boots on the linoleum floor. I looked toward the entrance, and the glass doors were swinging gently as though someone had just walked through, but nobody was there. I shrugged and went back to my work, assuming a customer had run out or maybe a delivery person had slipped in and out. The night passed without incident. 2 nights later, Brandon and I were in the back room, breaking down boxes of cereals. I heard someone calling my name. Clear. Direct. Hey, Tommy. My heart jumped. The thing was, Brandon was the only other person there. Did you hear that? I asked, freezing mid-punch on a box. What? Brandon mumbled, headphones in. He was clearly not listening. It said my name. Someone said my name. He shrugged and went back to emptying a pallet. I went to check the aisle. Empty. I checked the front of the store. Nothing. Every time I convinced myself it was a prank or just my imagination, the feeling didn't leave, the sense of being watched, heavy and unshakable. By mid-December, the occurrences became harder to dismiss. Customers would tell me they'd seen a man standing weirdly in the aisles, but when they approached him, he disappeared. One elderly woman, an almost weekly customer, came in just after midnight, dropped her shopping bag, and looked pale. Is he here? She asked, her voice trembling. Who? I said, feeling the same cold fear creep over me. The man, the one who follows me. I blinked. I don't know what you mean. I see him every time I shop late, she said. Standing at the end of the aisles, watching, never moving when I look, and I swear he disappears if I blink. I didn't know what to say. I tried to reassure her, offered her a seat while I called her a taxi. She left quickly, eyes darting to every corner. I checked the aisles afterward. Nothing. But the unease in the store didn't go away. The real terror began on a Friday around 2 a.m. I was alone. Brandon's last shift was 2 hours earlier. I was walking through the cleaning aisle, dragging a mop bucket to the back when I noticed him. The man, tall, skinny, coat thin, even though it was freezing, standing at the end of the aisle, completely still. I froze. "Sir?" I called, my voice steadier than I felt. "We're closing soon." He didn't move, just stared. I could see his face now. Pale, eyes unnerving, completely empty. Like someone had taken the life out of him and left only the shell. I tried to walk past, but my stomach twisted. Something in the air changed. Heavy, pressured. The lights above flickered. For a split second, the aisle was dark. When the lights came back, he had moved closer, just one step. I swallowed hard. "Sir, please, you need to leave now." Still nothing. I backed up slowly, my heart hammering, and reached for the intercom. My fingers shook so badly I almost dropped it. I hit the page button. "Attention, customer. Please move toward the front. We're closing." No response. I decided to retreat to the back room. Every aisle I passed, I felt him, watching me. The sensation wasn't subtle. It pressed down on my shoulders, made it hard to breathe. When I finally got to the stockroom, the door to the office creaked. My keys jingled on the counter. Something heavy shifted behind me. My breath caught in my throat. I turned. Empty hallway. Just empty cardboard boxes and the cold hum of the refrigeration unit. Then I heard it. Slow, deliberate dragging footsteps from the aisle I had just left. Not fast, not running, but methodical, heavy. I didn't want to know where they were going, but I couldn't ignore them. I edged toward the door leading to the front of the store. By the time I got there, the footsteps had stopped. The air was so still, it was deafening. I ran to the main floor. Nothing. Not a single sign of him. But then I saw it. All the shelves in the cleaning aisle had been shifted. Not knocked over, not messy, just rotated slightly, like someone had been observing me from the end of the aisle. Each product faced the wall. I hadn't touched them. Brandon hadn't been back there. No customer had. I bolted outside. I didn't even lock the doors. I didn't care. I ran to my car, teeth chattering from fear and cold, and didn't stop driving home for 10 minutes. That night, I didn't sleep. The following week, management got wind of the complaints. 2 corporate security employees came in to review footage. When I watched the recordings with them, everything seemed fine, except for the one camera I had pointed down the cleaning aisle. For a 10-minute window, the feed turned to static. At the last frame before the static, I could just make out a tall figure standing at the end of the aisle, face indistinct, watching me rearrange cans. "Did he move?" one of the security officers asked. "No," I admitted. "He just watched, and then he disappeared." The older officer sighed. "You're not the first employee to report him, but there's nothing we can do if he never touches merchandise and disappears before police arrive." I kept working, but the fear never left. Every time the automatic doors chimed, I checked them. Every time a shadow moved near an aisle, I froze. Customers started noticing my nervousness, asking if I was okay. I lied, saying I'd just been tired or stressed. The final incident happened the week before Christmas. I was alone again, clocked in late because of a snow delay, rearranging seasonal displays in the toy aisle. A little past 1 a.m., I bent to pick up a stuffed bear that had fallen. When I straightened up, he was there. No announcement, no sound, just standing at the end of the aisle. His coat looked thinner somehow, his skin almost gray in the fluorescent lights. And those eyes, I couldn't take my eyes off them. They were empty, but somehow aware. He stepped forward, slowly. One step. I tripped over a box and fell back, scrambling to get up. My phone slipped out of my pocket as I reached for the intercom. When I grabbed it, the man was gone. Just gone. No doors opened, no footsteps, nothing. I quit the next morning. I told HR it was personal. The truth was too terrifying to share. Friends asked why I left a stable job, but they didn't understand. I couldn't explain that I had felt watched, hunted even, by a man who might not even be fully human. Even now, months later, I avoid grocery stores at night. I refuse to walk the aisles alone after dark. I get chills when I hear a door chime and nobody enters. I know what I saw was real. I know it wasn't imagination. And I know somewhere out there, he still waits for someone to be alone in the aisles, late at night, staring at the shelves, rearranging cans, watching I don't go back. Story the end. It started on a Thursday evening in late November, when the wind off the interstate carried a chill sharp enough to make your teeth chatter, even through layers of clothes. I was working as a night stock associate at a large retail chain in rural Ohio. The store itself had a reputation among locals for being weird at night. Lights flickered in odd patterns, and employees often complained about hearing footsteps when they were alone in the aisles. I had laughed it off until that night. I was scheduled from 5 p.m. to 1 a.m., and the first few hours were painfully normal. Stocking shelves, scanning boxes, pushing carts, listening to the muted hum of fluorescent lights, and dealing with the occasional customer. By 8 o'clock, the store was mostly empty. Just me, the cashier, who had called in sick, and a security guard who did his rounds with a sleepy disinterest. Around 9:15, I noticed him, a man in a long, dark coat standing near the electronics section. He wasn't moving much, just standing there, hands in his pockets, head down. He didn't look at anything, didn't wander the aisles, didn't even glance up when another customer walked past. I assumed he was waiting for someone or for the store to close. But then he started moving, slow, deliberate, almost gliding between the shelves. His pace wasn't natural. He didn't walk like anyone I had ever seen. His movements were too fluid, too quiet. I picked up a box from a nearby shelf to keep my hands busy and tried to ignore him. By 10 p.m., he had disappeared. I told myself he must have left, maybe through the exit near the home goods section. But when I went to check the cameras, the footage showed him moving through the store, then vanishing entirely for several minutes, only to appear again in the back corner near the stockroom. I called out to him, clearing my throat loudly. "Sir, do you need help?" No response. I thought maybe he was hard of hearing or ignoring me. I walked toward the back of the store, flashlight in hand. The store lights flickered as I passed, as though they were warning me. When I reached the stockroom, I realized the back door was slightly ajar. I was sure I had locked it during the afternoon. "Lucas?" I whispered. That was the name of my coworker. Except he wasn't supposed to be working tonight. I stepped inside the stockroom. It was colder here, the air dry and unnatural, and the fluorescent lights barely illuminated the endless rows of pallets. My flashlight caught something on the floor. Wet footprints. Bare footprints. They started near the door and led into the darkness, toward the far corner where we stored electronics and small appliances. I swallowed hard, telling myself it was probably water tracking from someone's boots earlier. But the prints were too long, too narrow, almost inhuman. I called for the security guard over the walkie, but there was no answer. The voice on the radio was static, distorted, like it was being transmitted from another dimension. I followed the footprints, keeping my flashlight beam low, scanning for anything. That's when I heard it. A soft shuffle, almost like someone dragging their feet. Then a whisper. Not a coherent word, just a rasping sound that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere at once. I froze, my heart thudding painfully. The air smelled different here, metallic, like blood, but also like wet concrete. I rounded the corner and saw him, or what I think was him. The man from electronics, standing in the middle of the aisle, head down, shoulders shaking, but not like he was cold or scared. Shaking like something inside him was wrong. The moment he looked up, I realized his face was pale, almost waxy, and his eyes, God, his eyes, were too dark, too deep. Black, but with a faint glint of something alive. I took a step back. "Sir, you need to leave." My voice shook. He didn't respond. Instead, he took a step toward me. Not normal steps. Slow, stretching, unnatural, like the physics of his body didn't quite obey the world around it. I turned to run, but the exit I had come through was gone. Or maybe it never existed. The stockroom felt endless, aisles bending impossibly, rows of shelves stretching into shadow. Every time I tried to take a step, the air felt heavier, my legs resisting. "Lucas," I shouted. Somewhere in the distance a box fell, not loudly, but with a sound that echoed like a gunshot. I realized then the man wasn't alone. Shadows moved just beyond the reach of my flashlight, impossible angles twisting. Another shape slid across the shelves, silent. Then another. I ran. No, I didn't run. I stumbled, fell, crawled toward what I thought was the door, dragging myself across the cold concrete floor. Behind me, the whispers grew louder, closer. I didn't dare look back. I reached the stockroom door and threw myself through it. My flashlight clattered to the floor, and when I bent down to pick it up, I saw something that stopped my heart. The man, the figure, was standing right behind me in the main aisle. And he was wrong. Long limbs, unnatural angles, head tilting sideways, eyes fixed on me. I bolted for the front doors. Mary had left hours ago, The store was completely empty. I yanked the automatic doors open and ran out into the parking lot. Snow had started falling lightly, covering everything in a silent blanket. The store lights flickered one last time before the building seemed to sigh, like it was alive and watching me go. The next morning, corporate called. They claimed the security cameras had a glitch. They told me there was no one in the stockroom but me, that the footprints were likely water damage or a prank by another employee. I tried to tell them about the figure, the shadows, the whispering, but they didn't believe me. I stayed 2 more months before quitting. Every night when I closed, I felt the same unnatural chill in the back aisles. Every time I walked past electronics, I thought I saw someone moving just beyond the edge of my vision. Boxes would shift, carts would tip over for no reason. I began refusing to walk down the stockroom aisles alone. A coworker named James stayed behind after I left. He told me later that he had seen the figure too, sometimes in the camera footage, sometimes in the aisles. He quit after 2 weeks. Another employee, Rachel, claimed she had been tapped on the shoulder while stacking shelves, only to turn and find no one there. The store closed eventually, but not because of sales. Word spread among employees about the strange occurrences, and no one wanted to work the night shifts. The building was abandoned and boarded up, but locals still whisper about it. They claim to see lights flickering through the boarded windows at night, hear strange shuffling sounds and muffled whispers. Some say the shadows move in ways that don't obey physics, shapes bending and stretching in impossible ways. I will never go back there. And I warn anyone who hears this story, some stores aren't just weird at night. Some hold things inside them that watch, wait, and follow you in ways you can't see until it's too late. I have nightmares about the stockroom, the shadows, the whispering. Sometimes I wake up feeling cold, my skin crawling as if someone is standing right behind me, just out of sight. And I can't forget the look in the figure's eyes, empty, black, but aware, waiting. I don't tell many people. They think I'm exaggerating. But I know what I saw. I know what I felt. And if you ever work nights in a place that feels too empty, too quiet, too cold, remember this. The store is never truly empty. Some things linger long after the last customer leaves, and sometimes they wait for you. Story the end. I was working the late shift at a small, independently owned convenience store in rural Ohio, a place that had been in the family for decades. The store itself was old, wood floors that creaked when you walked, dim fluorescent lights that flickered unpredictably, and shelves that seemed just a little too tall for the space, making every aisle feel claustrophobic. Most nights were uneventful. A few customers trickled in, bought snacks or cigarettes, and left. But there was one night that changed how I thought about working alone forever. It was late October, the kind of night when the air is crisp and the wind rattles the windows, even though you can't always feel it behind the glass. I had closed the store at 10 p.m. and was finishing the nightly inventory. I was wiping down shelves near the back corner when I noticed a man standing near the door. He looked out of place, maybe mid-40s, tall, with a long coat that looked too heavy for the mild night. His face was pale, almost sickly, and he was staring at me with these unblinking eyes. I forced a smile. "Evening. Can I help you find anything?" He didn't answer immediately. He just tilted his head slightly and stared. "I'm looking," he said finally, his voice low, monotone. There was no warmth, no humor, nothing human about it, just flat words like he was repeating them without thinking. I nodded, keeping my distance. "All right, let me know if you need anything." He didn't move. He just stood there, watching. I felt my stomach knotting. I returned to the shelves, trying to focus on my task, but I couldn't shake the feeling that he was still staring at me, following me with his eyes as I walked up and down the aisle. About 20 minutes later, I realized he had moved closer, too close. I couldn't see anyone else in the store, and the door was locked. He was just there, standing silently near the corner of the snack aisle, watching me. My first instinct was to call my manager, but the phone line was dead. I figured it had to be a coincidence, maybe a reflection, maybe a shadow, but it didn't feel right. By 11:30, the store was nearly empty. I had just finished checking the cooler when I heard it, a faint scraping sound coming from the aisle behind me. Not the usual scrape of carts or boxes. This was slow, deliberate, and unnervingly quiet. I froze. "Hello," I called softly. No answer. I walked toward the noise, flashlight in hand, heart hammering. The beam cut through the dim aisle, but there was nothing there. Just shelves of chips and soda. I felt a shiver run down my spine. That's when I heard the whisper. Barely audible, it came from somewhere behind me, low and raspy. "Don't go." I spun around. Nobody. Empty aisle. My pulse was racing. I wanted to believe it was some prank, but I was alone. Totally alone, or so I thought. I decided to check the back storage room to make sure no one was hiding. The door creaked as I pushed it open. My flashlight cut through the darkness, illuminating stacked boxes and cleaning supplies. Everything looked normal. Relief washed over me, until I heard it again. The whispering, coming from the far corner of the storage room this time. "Stay. Stay with us." I froze. My chest tightened. I slowly shined my light toward the corner, and that's when I saw movement. A shadow detached itself from the wall, stretching unnaturally as it moved toward me. My first instinct was to run, but my legs felt like lead. The shadow glided, not walking, gliding silently across the floor. "Get out!" I shouted, my voice cracking. The shadow stopped. Then, from somewhere in the room, a child's laughter echoed, high-pitched, soft, almost innocent, but it carried something wrong, something cruel underneath. It bounced off the walls, surrounding me. I backed toward the door, fumbling with the handle, my hands slick with sweat. When I pushed the door open, I expected to see the main store, but the lights were out. Total darkness. Not the usual dim. This was an unnatural void. The air was colder, thick with an unidentifiable smell. I realized I was no longer standing in the storage room I knew. Everything looked the same, but distorted. The shelves seemed taller, the aisles longer, and the shadows deeper. I tried to find my way to the front, to the exit, but every corner I turned, I ended up in the same place. The whispering voices returned, louder now, overlapping. "Stay. Don't leave. Stay." I ran blindly, heart hammering, fear choking me, until I stumbled into the freezer aisle. The walk-in freezer door was open. Inside, I could see the blackness stretching endlessly. Then something moved inside. Something heavy, dragging itself across the floor. My flashlight flickered, then went out completely. I backed away, trembling, and slammed the freezer door shut. The sound reverberated through the store, but there was no echo. The air seemed to swallow it whole. When I dared to look up, I saw him, the man in the long coat, standing at the end of the aisle, perfectly still, staring at me. His eyes, I don't even know how to describe them. Empty, void-like, like he wasn't human. I ran. Not to the front, not to the back, just running down random aisles as trying to find an exit. But the store had changed. Every aisle was longer, darker, and more oppressive. Shadows followed me, stretching across the shelves, moving independently of anything that should cast them. The whispering continued, surrounding me from all sides. I tripped over a fallen box of cereal, and as I scrambled to get up, I heard it. The laughter again. That child's laugh, echoing from all directions. Then a voice, soft and low, whispered right into my ear. "You can't leave." I bolted toward what I thought was the main exit, only to find it led to a void. Nothing outside. Just darkness, stretching infinitely. I realized I was trapped. Completely trapped. Hours or maybe minutes, I couldn't tell, passed. I don't know how long I ran, turning aisles into more aisles, corridors into more corridors, until I found a door. A normal metal door with a push bar. Desperate, I threw myself against it. It opened. Bright fluorescent light poured in, and I fell onto the cold concrete of the parking lot outside. I scrambled to my car and didn't stop driving until I reached my apartment. I never went back to that store. I don't even drive past it anymore. I told no one what happened, not even my family. I knew they'd think I was insane. Sometimes late at night, I dream about the store, about the long aisles, the whispers, the shadows that moved independently of light and reason. And every time I hear that child's laughter, echoing from the void. I quit retail after that. I can't handle the thought of being alone in a store after dark ever again. But I know somewhere that store still exists. Somewhere in that old building, the lights flicker, the shadows move, and the voices wait. And sometimes when I close my eyes, I swear I can still hear the scraping, the whispering, and that laughter, soft, cruel, and unending. Story the end.